Greetings, friends, ladies and gentlemen. This is Stan once again, Stan the Radio Man, and we're back as we kind of come to a crucial time for life and business. This is the week leading up to Labor Day here in the United States, and that is a holiday, a very significant holiday, and it's really to honor especially those people who make a living by, as some would say, the sweat of their brow, the strength of their back, those people who actually make a living by laboring. Not just working, laboring. But of course, the whole idea has now spread that we all are honored by the fact that the way we make our living may be a good thing, and we are grateful for the opportunity to make a living. And so, however, we celebrate by taking a day off, a holiday, to rest. And it usually is the first Monday in September, and that is coming up, I believe, really right on September 1st. It's a significant day, but it also means more, particularly in the United States, that it's kind of the end of summer. And get back to work, get back to school. It's time to really start again. Now, for many people, particularly in the Jewish tradition, and though I'm not of the tradition, I still very much celebrate with them the fact that I say that New Year's does not come on January 1st. It actually comes on a very important holiday called Rosh Hashanah in the Jewish tradition, which I believe is on September 23rd this year. And that's the start of the Jewish New Year, which leads to what were called the Days of Awe until the very high celebration of Yom Kippur, a day of forgiveness and atonement and setting things right. And so I, in my later life here, have decided that I'm going to adopt that tradition of starting my new year in September. That also means that it is a time of real reflection and new beginning. And I'm 3 months ahead of you who actually begin on January 1, which you probably spend where you eat too much food and perhaps you waste time on listening to too much football and maybe fireworks and feasting and all of that. All of that's good, but we get a little bigger start to it. Now, I have come to an idea about a year ago, and that's where I've often said that my interesting ideas lead, if you are in the world of ideas, greater ideas can lead to greater insight, better understanding of the world, and that can lead to greater influence. And that's because I was very much influenced by the work of Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, a book that's over 80 years old, but still a bestseller. And I think it's still one of the best. And so I decided to try and update it a little bit with the modern days, because obviously it was written over 80 years ago. Still very timely and still very relevant, but the world has changed. And then I said, as one of my friends said, the important thing is that you have an impact in life. And then he said, impact is what really drives income. You make an impact, you might be able to have greater income. So ideas, insight, influence, impact, and income. There we go. So that's where I came up with impact. But then something else happened. Years ago, a man named Albert Einstein, you've heard of him, and the theory of relativity and his mathematical thinking, and then, of course, his idea about the significance of how that might lead to atomic theory, and then, of course, the development of the atomic bomb. It was said that he also was working on what was called a theory of everything. Could he actually look at the world and see if he could have an explanation of why the world is the way it is? He kind of gave up on that. Later on, a gentleman named Ken Wilber, I think with a bit of a smile, came up with an idea which he said was a theory of everything. And it was a matrix of understandings that, with a smile, he said, if you understand how this matrix works, it might explain many things, maybe everything. Well, I don't think this is a theory of everything. But what I have discovered in my thinking and talking with wise men and women like you, that maybe we should adopt what I call a zone theory of life. That, in effect, we live in a world of zones. Now, many of you may have heard the word. Oftentimes, it was someone has said, I'm really in the zone. And that's a kind of a, well, wow. Some basketball player is all of a sudden in a place where, he's out there and he shoots three 3-pointers in a row and boom, they go in. And they say he's really in the zone. Or a golfer finally has a swing, and each time he swings that drive, he's putting it out there. And sometimes when we're in a performance of some kind or a state of mind, we say, hey, I've lost track of time. I was really zoned. And it doesn't just mean zoned out. It means that, in effect, you're in a good place in space. And so I said, maybe that's irrelevant. And so what came to me is that I found out that when we're young, and I've adopted this idea, it's just a growing idea, but we're going to work on it, see if it's helpful to you. I raised 2 small children, and they grew up and became young women and now mature women. But of course, in dealing with young children, immense curiosity. Always. Why? What? I said, you know what? We were born as, I believe, God inspired human beings with a deep sense of curiosity. We want to know how things work. And so I said, we were born into the curiosity zone. And that's a good zone because you're always learning, always exploring, trying to figure things out and how things work and asking questions. And even better, I said, if we can maintain that state of mind, because unfortunately most people lose it, they get it beat out of them in some way. A society comes in and school crushes their curiosity and say, just do what you're supposed to do. Don't ask all those questions. Eventually we learn, we'll just kind of conform rather than live in the curiosity zone that we were born into. And my world would say, don't ever leave the curiosity zone. Always ask yourself, could it be that everything I thought I knew and believed was wrong? Should I keep exploring and keep learning and keep trying to make a difference by doing things differently? But then eventually we have to come to a part where we've got to grow up or begin to grow up and make a living. And we've got to make an impact. Yeah. We got to make a little dent in the universe. We've got to do something that makes a difference so that people will compensate us and pay us and reward us so that we can have the things we need to live well and do well and make our mark. We got to hit the target. We've got to make an impact in the world today. That's what we have to do, and we have to do it well. So we move from the curiosity zone to the impact zone. And we're going to spend a long time there. That's what we're doing is we're living our lives and building our careers and creating new opportunities and building a business. We're trying to make an impact so that we can have, greater income and maybe greater insight and greater influence and then greater ideas again for innovation and creation. And that, I say, leads to an idea where finally we may begin to, as I say, go into what I call the impact zone to the Issachar zone. Strange word, Issachar. Now, it comes from actually part of the Hebrew tradition, which I'm very much familiar with, that it was said in the olden days under the Jewish King David, the guy who put it to Goliath. That was an impact, you know, put him down with a slingshot. That he had as his advisors a group of men and women from a tribal group called Issachar. Issachar. And the description was they understood the times and they knew what to do. Wow. Wouldn't that be great? If you had the wisdom to truly, through your life experiences and education and your observation, that you were keen-minded, that you could better understand. As I say, the old cartoon character Bugs Bunny saying, "What's up, Doc? What's going on? And what should we do?" And this is kind of the period in our life when we maybe become wiser. We begin to realize, again, our curiosity has led us to realize that there were a lot of things we thought were true and right, and maybe they're not anymore. And so we grow in the Issachar zone, the wisdom zone. Many people never make it, but that's a zone that we can strive for. And then we say it's time to change things. Not only just make a difference, but create new things. And so we find a way, and it might be through a terrible accident, a tragedy, or a great love. Finally, we decide that we're in the transformation zone. We have the opportunity not only to change things, but to transform them. And so, in effect, we enter into the transformation zone. And these might be much later in our life when we really have the wisdom to do some significant things. Or as someone said, finally, after 30 years of drinking myself almost to death, I was transformed into a totally new person through AA, or perhaps a religious or life-changing experience. And perhaps I found a new way to do life and business, and it was transforming. And right now, one of my good friends and students and mentors, Joseph Pine, is writing a book simply called The Transformation Economy. But there's nothing simple about it. It is a whole new way of looking at life and business that we are made, perhaps, to enter the transformation zone. Well, what do you think of that? And that might eventually lead us to another zone. We've made it. We've done well. And now we say, is it time to pay back, to give honor and help to others? And then we can enter into the generosity zone, where one of the issues of our life is, what can we give to others? How can I share? How can I be generous? How can I do that? And some of the happiest people in the world are those who are living in the generosity zone. They have found that truly it is more blessed to give than to receive. It's better to give away rather than to tuck away. Generosity. Finally, we're at what I call the encore zone. We have lived a life that's full and rich and well, and now we go back. We're not going to retire. We're not supposed to quit. And you actually say spiritually, emotionally, physically, what's the next project in my life? What's the thing I should do now? Maybe I don't have to work anymore to make enough income. What can I do now? And some people say that, as one person said who was in the encore zone in a project that she loved, and I said to her, how's it working out? And she says, it's great. I only have one regret. I wish I would have done this 30 years ago. The encore zone. And it's a whole new way of perhaps living, as some people say, in the fourth quarter or more than the second half stage of life, that we find that maybe what we were made for, we can now do. And eventually, that may lead us at some stage in life. We always want to be in the curiosity zone, but all of a sudden we begin to realize maybe there's more to life than right here on planet Earth. Maybe there are spiritual and non-material and other things that transcend our own earthly and physical and material experience. And so we may find ourselves moving somewhat into the transcendence zone. The transcendence zone. Well, there we go. Now, keep in mind that this is a thought experiment that might help us know what to do. And that's why my colleagues and I are developing a book called The Coaching Zone, in which we're trying to help coach people into a zone way of living and a zone way of leading and a zoned way of coaching. Because you know what? We should always be helping and teaching others. We should always be living the life of a coach or a teach or a mentor. We should always be in the business of helping other people flourish, to gain a good life, to gain the best performance out of their life. We should perhaps all know a little bit about what it's like to live and be and serve in the coaching zone. Well, that's what we're thinking about. What is a zone? Well, as we say, first of all, it's a state of mind. Then it's a state of being. Actually, it's not just in your mind, it's how you are. It also can be a state of place. I'm in the right place. I said to a young gentleman the other day, and he was telling me now that the position he has, he said, I feel I'm in the place just right. Finally, I've done a number of things, but it's a state of place. It could also be a state of practice where you understand that you're always in a place where you keep practicing. For a number of years, the summer visitor to our Caribbean home was a gentleman named, well, I'll let him be anonymous in some sense, but he was a world famous Metropolitan Opera star. He was called Jerome. We called him Jerry. Maybe you can discover who he was. Every morning, this man who was a Metropolitan Opera star and sang in the great, guess what? Every morning we heard him singing the scales. And we said, Jerry, why do you do that? And he would say, because I always have to be in a state of practicing. You never outgrow the state of a need to practice. because that's how you enter into the highest state, which is the state of performance. Performing at your best. Doing what you were made for. And we love the expression sometimes used by the world famous athlete, the star performer, Eric Liddell, from the story of Chariots of Fire, when he said to his sister, he said, "Don't you know, God made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure." And so oftentimes I will say in my coaching, what are you doing when you feel the pleasure? I hope this might be helpful. We are going to continue, as I have with a few colleagues, and hopefully many of us, to see if living the zone full way of life may be part of the answer to how we enjoy and live a life of true and real success, and help others flourish and go and grow and be in the place just right too. Maybe that'll be a part of what your life could be about. Thank you for giving me 20 minutes. I hope it's been helpful and useful. And we will continue. Here we go at the latter part of 2025 as we go into the second quarter of the 21st century. Maybe we're called to understand all of the zones in a zone full life experience. All the best and blessings to you till we carry on, and maybe next time. Bye for now.